Welcome to the Next Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this episode, I am going to facilitate a conversation with myself as the guest expert in this bonus episode that is much needed in these telling times on racism. So my hope is in this mini bonus episode that I will leave you with some actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. I share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey. It requires bravery and courage, and you do not have to do it alone. At Next Pivot Point, I believe we are stronger together. We are one. So this week's topic is a heavy one. If you've been following the events of the last week in the United States, like many of you have, I'm going to assume that all of you are aware of George Floyd's death and the recent events from February and really for the last decades, centuries, in fact, on racism in the United States, that there's still a common disbelief that racism exists, and recent events have provided yet again another opportunity to see that it in fact still exists. And I have to say, for people like myself and probably for you as a listener, it's hard to stomach that people need things like this to show that it exists in a world that is marginalized and where people of color and people that are different than the majority group certainly don't have as much power, they don't have as much wealth, they don't have as much access to resources. And I've been trying to talk about this during the times of COVID for the last 3 months, and it's really been overshadowed by coronavirus, and rightfully so. Certainly in March and April, where we were very fearful of people's lives and health being at risk. But COVID has been a magnifier for privilege, and what I wanted to share with our listeners today is a few thought exercises for you and some data to really help show that this problem has been here in the background forever. It's been magnified in the last few months. And if you look at George Floyd and his story as an example of how racism and barriers exist, we know that coronavirus has adversely affected the African American community, and their death rate is 3.5 times higher from the virus. And that's an undeniable statistic affecting marginalized communities. And certainly the reasons for that are underlying conditions, diabetes, obesity, some other things. But honestly, it's access to healthcare. And what does access to healthcare mean, right? It means privilege, living in an area where you have access to a good hospital, living in a community where you have access to resources and a support network and education, and all the things that come with privilege and likely white privilege. So it's very disturbing to know that this data has been around for months and no one's paid attention. And so let's go back to George Floyd and his story. How did he end up with a $20 counterfeit bill? Think about the situation that he was likely in as an African American man, and that many African American communities and families are in. And his story is not uncommon. Many are unemployed. We are at an unemployment rate of 1 in 5 nowadays. And who has that adversely affected? It is over skewed to the minority population, to people of color, to women who have held on to their jobs. Those in the C-suite, those in senior leadership teams that are making decisions about who makes layoffs. It's very telling who we've let go in these situations. And George Floyd was affected by the pandemic financially. He was in a bad situation and made one potentially bad choice. We don't even know how that happened, but certainly not worth what happened to him. And I share that just as a perspective on if you think the kneeling, and you watched the video and you saw the act of violence done to him, yes, that is clearly wrong. But all the reasons that he was in that situation to begin with, if you were to truly unpack them, think about how many Americans are facing that same set of circumstances where that could happen to them. That's the bigger story. That's the bigger impact. This is not one story. This is why people are protesting, because this is something that could easily happen in other communities. And that's not fair, and that's not right. So that brings me to what I want to share with you. If you're wondering, what do I do? What do I say right now? Many good-hearted, amazing, well-intentioned allies in training, as I like to call them, have asked me this question. It's been the number one question I've gotten over the last week. And I myself, I will say, for the first 2 days following the news, just was viscerally affected by the news and quite emotional myself, and wanting to support those that I knew well in the African American community, to just send my condolences and that I was with them. But after that, kind of dug out emotionally last Friday and thought about, okay, what can I do? Use my voice. What does that mean? What would I want allies to do, right? What could I do? And so I just put together a list of 3 simple things, and I'm oversimplifying it. The list could run deeper. And if you're curious, check out my LinkedIn post. I will post to that in the show notes. But essentially, I put together 3 ideas for people that want to learn more. And honestly, that's what you can do right now. You can listen, you can learn, and you can seek to understand different perspectives right now, because your perspective is not the only perspective. Especially if you're a white person, there's no way you can understand systemic racism. It just hasn't affected you in the same way. Now, you may be in a relationship with somebody you care about, a person of color, and you've gotten to see through their lens. That is an opportunity. But for many people that have reached out to me, well-intentioned allies, don't even know where to start. So if that's you, a couple things I would recommend that have truly helped me on my ally journey, and by no means proclaim to be a racism expert, but the things that have helped me is understanding white fragility, for example. And this is a great thing you can do. Read a book. Listen to a podcast. Get curious to understand a different perspective, especially if you're like, I don't know if this really exists. This was just a one-time thing, or police are good people, or all the rhetoric we're seeing to defend what's happening right now. Or if you know somebody that's saying those things, it's a good opportunity to open their eyes. So the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is an excellent read. Another couple I'd add to my bookshelf if you're curious about this topic, Me and White Supremacy by Lila Sayed. I will say the title's a little scary. The book is not. There's some really thought-provoking exercises. It's a great exercise for a book club, and it's a very quick read. I really understood a lot of the things that happened in my childhood and the influence of my parents on my racist views of the world. And I have to unpack that as an ally to understand how that could still show up for me today in my biases, because I'm not above bias. No one is. This is how our brain operates. So it really helped keep me in check and understand some underlying beliefs that I had about race and meritocracy and the myth of meritocracy. So listen to a podcast. My 2 favorite that really address the deep systemic issues involving race. Seeing White is on Scene in Radio. John Beeline is an excellent host. His voice is like butter, and he's a white man. One of the very few white men talking about racism publicly. And we need more white men to talk about this. That will really be the tide of change when we have all allies, all white allies supporting this message. And then a white woman, Jennifer Brown, has a podcast, The Will to Change. It has a number of episodes on racism and really gets to the root of the issue. Because if you think it's just these policing allegations, there's so many more layers to this. And once you understand the systems, and then we're all playing a role in these systems, it becomes a lot easier, I think, as an ally to say, it isn't that I'm racist, it's that the system supports racism and I have a role in the system. I benefit from the system, or perhaps I don't benefit from the system. We all probably can keep a score on that, and that's not the point. But the point is to better understand systems. And if you want to get really deep and dip your toe further into the racism understanding waters, I would recommend really understanding politics, voting with your dollars to companies that actually legitimately support diversity and inclusion. I can tell you as a diversity and inclusion practitioner that my words have fallen silent on a number of organizations during the pandemic. And again, rightfully so, to hit pause at some point. but people saying we're not focused on that this year, for example. That's very, very telling of what's really important and what's not. It's easy to get distracted by other things, but this is a great exercise in understanding the more we become distracted by short-term events, the lasting impact it can have on society. And that's just simply not okay. We can't hit pause on this. Now is the time to persevere. And the words also that I shared in that LinkedIn post is just be open to learning. Be curious to understand rather than share your own experiences or defend your own points of view. Now's not the time for that. And one big pushback I get in using the word ally is being an ally, self-proclaiming to be an ally isn't the point. That's similar to being what I would call a white savior. Save the day mentality. I'm here. What can I do? That's not how to show up as an ally. Allyship is in the eye of the beholder. So be really intentional with how you show up as an ally and engage in a way that I want to help. I want to be supportive. I'm striving to be an ally. I want to be an ally, not I am. You don't get to say you are. It's the person of which you're helping, the community of which you're helping that can recognize you for that. And that's honestly one of the best gifts and rewards of all this work, of someone recognizing you and what you're doing and the benefits of that. So those are some thoughts if you're curious on where to start. I did share some additional thoughts in an article on Parade magazine about bias. There's actually 40 different ideas in that article that I will also share in the show notes. So there's no shortage of ideas. What I would say is rather than getting overwhelmed with your book list, your podcast list, all the ideas I'm sharing with you, just simply make a little bit of time each day to think about this. Maybe have a discussion with your family about this. Maybe watch a documentary on this. Think, how can I continue to learn and unpack these things? And what does my journey look like for me? This is a choose your own adventure allyship journey. You think about the things that are your greatest gifts to help. Not everybody wants to show up to a protest, myself included. That is not how I want to be an ally, and that's okay. When people say use your voice, they don't mean, echo it from the rooftops. That's not for everybody. They mean don't be silent. They mean be curious. They mean ask questions. They mean learn, get on the journey. That's what they mean by not being silent. So please, please engage. And one of the easiest forms of allyship right now, because the African American community is being hit so hard, and talking with my African American friends, they're so scared and deeply emotionally wounded from this experience because they're thinking this could happen to my family. I'm scared again. My husband goes to the store and I'm double checking he has everything he needs to not get pulled over. I'm afraid he's not going to come back. That's not a fear I have as a white woman. And so when you compare notes with somebody and truly empathize the experiences that they're living right now, you realize very quickly that we have different lenses on the world and the world is different for us. So one of the best things you can do to a coworker, someone you know that's a person of color, especially African Americans, is say, I'm reaching out to you because I care about you. My thoughts are with you right now. Don't ask them to explain how they're feeling. Don't ask them to explain what's going on. Don't put the ownership on them to help you be an ally and to educate you. There are books and podcasts that I've mentioned for that. Just simply lead with empathy and tell them that you care. That's one of the best things that you can do right now, to say, I'm here for you. I care about you. This is not right, what's happening right now. I want you to know I stand with you. And really genuinely meet it. And then show up intentionally. Don't just say that now and go back to regular life. Keep at it. Keep up with that message. Check in with those people. Build new relationships. Diversify your network if you don't have that many people of color in it. It's always a chance to reach out. And people are very welcoming and very much appreciate that empathetic response right now. So those are some ideas for you. The last thing I'll leave with you is I found this Harvard Business Review article this morning very helpful as well. And the title of the article is U.S. Businesses Must Take Meaningful Action Against Racism. And I always like to share kind of own voices, people in the trenches sharing their thought leadership. And I'd like to mirror this and also share the link to this article Because one of the biggest things that they said they can do, and I think this speaks to the fear of those that want to be allies but don't know how, is avoiding the missteps. And there are 3 common missteps that people tend to make early on in this journey before they understand. Is 1, staying silent, which we've addressed. You can't say, I don't see color, racism doesn't exist, slavery was over 150 years ago. That's the rhetoric of silence that it largely is still very alive and well and super unhelpful in this journey. Admit racism does exist. Do not stay silent. Becoming defensive, and you can see this online and social media. You can see this in politics, certainly today, of defending not all police are bad, or this is just an isolated event, or personally feeling to justify where you are in life versus our African American communities. That's the white fragility message that I mentioned earlier. And then overgeneralizing. We love to put people into groups. Oh, what's happening with the protest is because Black people are rioting and protesting, right? We love to feel like we know everything and just apply labels and overgeneralize what's happening. So watch out for that language with people. Just watch out for non-inclusive language and simply correct people. What did you mean by they are showing up at that protest? Unpack that for me. Just simply be curious and don't be afraid to call people out for these missteps. It doesn't have to be a big argument. You can simply just say, hey, when you said that, what do you mean by that? Or help me understand where you're coming from there. I'm curious to learn more. Here's something that I discovered that was really helpful for me. Maybe this is something you could think about. And I'm telling you, if your skin color is white, your message will be heard much more loudly. And white women are coming into this conversation. There's an excellent news piece out of Louisville about white women standing between protesters and police over the weekend. It's a beautiful image of allyship. But as soon as I saw that, I thought, where are the white men? And this is the last call to action I want to leave you with. If you are a white man, then I'm fortunate listening to this podcast, or you know a white man. I have had 3 very candid conversations with white men over the last couple of days, and I will tell you they want to help. You are the key. This is something we have missed in racial movements of the past, in civil rights movements. We haven't had white men engaged. We need our white allies, all of our white allies, especially those in positions of power and influence and those that can make decisions. Please, please use your voice. The subtle, small things of allyships, sharing your perspective, asking questions, being curious to understand, picking up a book, talking to your kids about it is huge. So do not underscore that we don't want you in this conversation. We absolutely do. And we actually need you. It's necessary for more positive change. So I'll leave you with those ideas today. Thanks for listening. It helped me vent to get this out a little bit. I hope it was helpful. Again, we do this work because I truly believe it matters. I'm not hitting pause on diversity and inclusion, and I'm glad the world, amongst all the sadness, is awoken to how important this work is. And we have to reset and pivot forward positively from this. We have no other choice. So thank you for caring about this. Thank you for leading like an ally. Did you know that you can find all 5 seasons of our 50+ episodes at nextpivotpoint.com? And you can sign up for a complimentary 7-day preview of our new program, Lead Like an Ally, and order our new book, Lead Like an Ally. I appreciate you listening to this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear this message? White men. Hit the share button and connect with me on LinkedIn. Simply search Julie Kratz, Kratz. I post there daily. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together. We are one.